Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday to you. It is time for Coffee with PC. Naturally, I've got my cup of coffee here. Again, what I brewed up this morning from Double, it's called. It's one of Price and I's favorite. We ordered another big bag of it, 5 pounds, because it lasts a while. And it's a lot cheaper that way. So we're enjoying that from that roaster in Atlanta. I'm going to finish up my cup here shortly and get on to the rest of my day. Thanks for taking just a few minutes to join me here as we check in this midweek thing. We had a pretty exciting day yesterday. Tuesday, was our Vpk graduation. You may know we have a child care center here called the Jack Hill Child Care Center. It's been around, it's probably pushing 18 to 20 years now. I didn't think to look it up, but it's been around a while. It was started by the Hill family, was the key funding mechanism. That's why it's called Jack Hill. He was the patriarch of that family and passed away before it opened, but it had always been a vision of Jack and Dottie to open it. And the first kind of workers and teachers were Jack and Nora Harley. So they were the ones that got it started from a staff point of view, and Miss Dottie at the time was key in seeing that happen. And so here we are all these many years later. Had another graduation yesterday, actually our largest VPK class yet. We had 10 graduate through our VPK just yesterday. It was a good time. The families come out. We have a little ceremony. They put on their little cap and gowns, and I would give them their diploma. They have a lunch afterwards. It was really great. Very exciting to see that. Always fun. Some of these kids too, we've had, one of them in particular, Alyssa, was here since, she was just a couple of months old. So we've really seen her grow up, and several of the others as well grew up for several years through our center and now graduated. It's really kind of a neat thing. And I say that for two reasons. One, because it was a lot of fun to watch the kids. They usually do a few songs and do a great job. Cute as all get out doing that. But it's also a ministry of our church. And so it's an opportunity. If you didn't know that, maybe there's a way. If you're looking for a way to volunteer, the daycare center, the child care center is a great place. They can always use an extra set of hands. Yeah, there's a few hoops you have to jump through because we're a licensed center and fingerprinting and background check and whatnot. But if you just want to help out in the sense of I just want to come and read books one day to give the teacher a break, for an hour here or there, just to be an extra set of hands or to help somewhere. Hey, we'd love to have that happen. You can get in touch with us and talking about kind of that generational aspect of it right now. Jack and Dottie's, great granddaughters, Quinn and Emery, are in there. Audra's kids are in there, so it's kind of passed on through that. It's kind of neat to see that, and so it was very fun yesterday. Had a good time, and it is graduation season, so in a week and a half or so, maybe just about a week. I'm not sure exactly when graduation is. I know school is almost out. Next week's the last week, so maybe next Wednesday is our high school graduation. I've been here in our church long enough. This is kind of really cool that I'm able to see people graduate, not every year, not this year, but for the past several years, having been here as long as I have, that I remember when they were born. So that's kind of an interesting thing to literally have watched some of these kids grow up through our church and grow up in their families, and now they're graduating, or they're graduating college, or they're starting families of their own. That sense is just really neat to have that perspective of as many years as Denise and I have been here. And we still stay in touch with many of our ones who have graduated and started families that are out, whether it's in our community or as you would expect, many have moved away. So it's a really neat thing to see that legacy. And it reminds me particularly, when we think educationally, it's an important process where kids are taught kind of the basics step by step, and they grow in their learning and they learn a little more, whether it's, they start with their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and depending on how they progress, on up into literature and algebra and trig and calc, or however far math goes these days. It's a progression. It's learning a little bit at a time so that their knowledge base grows, so that they're able to tackle tougher challenges, to learn more, to grow their knowledge base, to be able to tackle tougher challenges. And that reminded me exactly of what we talked a little bit about on Sunday. I quoted 2 Timothy, or I usually say 2 Timothy 2:2 to emphasize the twos in that verse. 2 Timothy 2:2. Timothy is Paul's son in the faith. We mentioned that. He goes, as we looked at in Acts 16, particularly to bring Timothy. He wants Timothy to be a part of his second missionary journey, so he brings him into the team, and they begin to travel together. But he writes a letter later when Timothy is the pastor at the church at Ephesus. So you can see that. He started out with the basics of the faith. He learned that, Paul writes, from his mother and his grandmother, who taught him the basic ABCs, as it were, of what it means to have faith. And then he grew in that, and then he took the practical step. We might say under Paul, he took his internship, where he learned the ins and outs of what it meant to start new churches and to see people come to faith in Christ. Eventually, he was in a leadership position in a local church. And it's interesting that Paul writes him a couple times. We have a couple letters, but in 2 Timothy 2:2, he says this: "The things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful individuals who will be able to teach others also." As I said Sunday, I wanted to re-emphasize today, it's the process of discipleship in a verse, in a nutshell. That we learn some things from God by His Spirit, but from mentors and other teachers. And then what we should do is pass those things along to another person who can learn them, so that they get to the point that they can pass them along to another person. And Paul says that to Timothy. The things you've heard me say, whether it was as he was traveling with them or in one-on-one conversations, and sometimes in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust, pass on to faithful individuals, not just to give them knowledge, but pass it on in a way that they will be able to teach others also. It is a beautiful picture. I love that he didn't say, and this is maybe what we do sometimes, when we think about modern expressions of church. What Paul says to Timothy, who's a pastor in a local church, he doesn't say, what I want you to do is gather a bunch of people in auditoriums and in a charismatic way present to them the ideas that I told you. Now, that's not what he says at all, but that's sort of, in our world, that's the measure of success, if we're honest. In church world, which I'm a part of, in the professional clergy world, that's kind of how we're ranked, by how big our crowd is that we preach to on Sundays. And usually the ones, when you go to the conferences that are heralded, is you got to hear them, and they're anointed by God, and all of these words that we throw at them. It's because they have a big platform, they have a big crowd. But that's not what Timothy hears from Paul. He doesn't say, make sure you tell this to a big crowd. He said, find some faithful individuals, teach them. He also doesn't say, listen, Timothy, you need to take the things I've learned, that you learned from me, and you need to build yourself a platform, or I might even be a little more cynical and say, build a brand, so that through all of you can become an influencer. That's a weird new job that's out there, but you can, through your reach of your platform and your brand, people will come and they'll hear, and that's how this stuff is going to get out there. He doesn't tell him that. Now, I know it's a different time and it's a different part of a technological world. The idea that I'm sitting here recording on my phone and you're watching it, just like that is foreign to Timothy. But nonetheless, that idea in our culture is very much that, I would say, celebrity-izing of church world and church leaders. But that's not Paul's instruction to Timothy. It was, find faithful people that you can entrust these things to, and they will teach others also. That was it. And it's interesting that when we think, and as we've gone through the book of Acts, I've said this more than once, the people that propelled the message of Christ increasingly outward were the ordinary people. The superstars that we meet in the gospel, by the time where we are in Acts 16, they've kind of faded a bit into the background. The rest of the story is Paul, who we would say, well, Paul's a pretty big superstar, but think about the early church. Certainly Jerusalem, because it was a Jewish movement. Jesus came as the Messiah to Israel, the fulfillment of all those messianic promises, and that's where it started. But when it found its first sort of center, that would be its evangelism center, which is where we find the home church of Paul, is in Antioch. And we don't know who is responsible for starting the church at Antioch. It just says certain men of Cyprus and Cyrene. It doesn't even give us a name. We have no name, but faithful men who had heard from someone older and wiser and more mature in the faith, were in Antioch and told other faithful people who told other faithful people, and it became a church in the midst. By the way, if you remember that week when we talked about it, a very secular city, a very a city that had a temple, a pleasure grounds of one of the gods or goddesses. I forget the one offhand. So it wasn't exactly, a nice Christian city that just or a nice Jewish city that became Christian because it was normal. No, it was a pagan city with pagan gods that becomes one of the key centers for the expansion of the church. And who started it? We don't know. And then Paul, that kind of superstar, as he's moving, one of his desires that we see and we'll trace a bit in the book of Acts is he wants to go to Rome. It takes some doing to get there, but he has this desire, it seems, to go. Yes, it's under guard and having been arrested and dealing with that, certainly, but that's his desire because he thinks Rome is the center of the Roman Empire, the city of Rome, and if he can just get the gospel to Rome, certainly it's going to take hold and spread like wildfire. But we learn when he gets to Rome, it tells us in Acts 28 that certain brothers and sisters there, brothers and sisters is the word we use to mean other believers, there were already believers in Rome who heard he was coming and came to meet him, came a bit of a way to meet him, to welcome him. So his desire to get there as this great evangelist, when he gets there, this center of the political and cultural world, Rome, but would become a center of the Christian world, already has believers. How did that happen? We don't know who did it. We don't know who made it to Rome first. We don't know who won the first convert. We don't have a record of some mega church in Rome started by a charismatic leader. It was just an everyday, ordinary follower of Jesus. So let me come full circle and I back to graduation. Whether it's these VPK graduates about to go to kindergarten, or maybe we go a little further, we have 8th grade graduation, or we have high school graduation, or college graduation, whatever we get there, just reminded me watching that and thinking about this time of year, how important it is that we entrust to these young people the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s of the faith, so that they can learn a little more and grow a little more. And in the next step of their life, from VPK to kindergarten, or from elementary school to middle school, or from middle to high, or from high to college, or from college to the world, to the career world, that they have a basis that they can go out and it's their everyday, ordinary lives, wherever they find themselves, sharing the faith that they have. Your everyday, ordinary life, wherever you find yourself, in whatever circle of influence you have, sharing your faith so that the gospel moves forward. And that's really the emphasis of the book of Acts. And I hope we're getting that as we're going through it together, that it's really hitting home. I know it is for me and making me think about some things maybe you'll hear as we go along. So that's kind of a little bit of rehashing from Sunday, but really thinking about these young people and hoping that the 4 or 5 or 3 or however many years they've had in our center where they learn the basics of the Bible, they have chapel together, they have Bible stories every week, that they're going to go out into the world with the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s that we can build into their lives, that this will be the next generation of believers that will carry the message of Jesus further than it is now. Well, hey, that's about all the time I have today. I got to get back and get to a few things on my to-do list, so I'm sure you do as well. So I'm going to let you have the rest of your day back. I'm going to just another sip or 2 of my coffee, finish that up, and maybe we'll see you on Sunday. 9 o'clock is our service, in person, online. Love to have you join us either way. So until then, have a great rest of your week.